I think the big thing here was despite me already having heard more about this, knowing that this was nothing like the movie and knowing specifically like the way that it ends, just from that being kind of common knowledge, this still was absolutely not what I was expecting. And that made this a fascinating read. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, which, I somehow still did not really know what I was getting into with this one, despite the fact that I'd heard a lot of things about it. And everything I've heard is that it is very different. I knew specifically it was vampires more than like the zombies, and I am talking about the Will Smith movie, the newer version. Although I think there's a couple of other ones that have been adapted to, which I'd be kind of curious to watch now, to be honest. But anyway. I knew it was more vampires and they made them kind of zombies, and that it was as well too. And this is a book that's like 70 years old, and I feel like the how it ends is kind of common knowledge. I feel sorry. I'm going to talk. Oh, spoilers here. So if you don't want to know anything about it, then you probably don't want to watch this review. But knowing as well that it's vampires, and that the idea of it with it kind of ending is that it's he's actually doesn't realize that he's like the bad guy, and like that's the whole point of the name I Am Legend, where he's realizes that to these vampires that he's killing and experimenting on, he's the bad guy, whereas he of course sees himself as the hero. And you don't really get that. I think there was like an alternate ending of the movie, again kind of common knowledge, that it was more like that, where he realized what was happening with it. But they don't really get into that as much, and I feel like makes it so much more compelling. Honestly, it's just like versus just like, oh, there's this big outbreak and everybody here. Like that twist feels like had to have been so revolutionary at the time, and it's still, like I said, despite knowing this, knowing how it's going to end, the end of this book hits so hard, and I recommend trying it, just because this was not a favorite of mine. It's not something I think I would ever reread, but the ending just it hits so hard, and it was so unexpected because I enjoyed my time. I talked recently, I read The Body Snatchers, which was another one where I feel like I was really familiar. I knew generally what was going to happen, how it was going to end, even though I'd never read it, and still had a good time experientially just reading it. This one, though, was even more so just because of some of those elements. But I want to talk some of the things that just really surprised me, because this is hardcore vampires, like vampires, and I didn't expect it to go quite that far. Down to you get some at some points overly long scientific explanations of how the vampires can be like a real thing, and that it's not just the more fantasy elements. This is more like sci-fi horror elements with it, more horror almost than anything, but it's definitely more of that. And you get some like long explanations, which I didn't mind, just because again I found it kind of interesting that the main character too, Dr. Robert Neville, who's a scientist, he's trying to like make sense of it, make sense like why on earth would vampires not like garlic, why would they be affected by crosses, things like that too, and trying to actually find scientific reasons to explain it, which I thought was an interesting take on it as well. And just again, like the idea of this character who's like the last person that he knows of around, who has managed to survive, and is going around and doing what he thinks is the only thing he can do, and killing off these vampires, and then the vampires actually being intelligent, also to a way higher degree than I would have expected too. Uh, they see him as this villain, and it was really fascinating. And the other thing too is the character is not at all like a character you can root for, and I think maybe partially that's because it makes the twist a little bit less surprising, but also I think it's just, instead of writing it and trying to pull the rug out from under you, it's a more complex story, because of the fact that this character is not very relatable. And yeah, like he's all on his own, but just like him and like his thoughts and his kind of twisted mind where he's at, like this is not a mentally well person, and it's not something that you would really expect somebody to be doing very well mentally if they were in this type of situation. And it's also, I feel like it makes it seem too that he probably could have and should have had a little bit more idea than he did, and was sort of just willfully blind, and just kind of in his own little world. And it's just, again, the character himself, who's not a real great guy by any means in here, and just him and his behavior and his thoughts and following him, it makes it so much more twisted. Versus, obviously, the movie wants to make the main character a very sympathetic person, somebody you root for, who's just potentially made this mistake, and it has a much more optimistic ending. Like, this is not a particularly optimistic book by any means, and I won't get into like every detail here, because, again, I feel like all of this stuff is just, if you're like me, probably makes you more interested to read it if you haven't. But it goes in so many unexpected directions, despite me feeling like I knew what I should expect. And I do often like to go into books blind, just because I like to kind of experience this. And I feel like, even if somebody, like, if I would have watched this review that I'm recording right now, and known these things, I would have still been like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's so different from what I would have expected. So I feel like it wouldn't change. And that's why I'm just, again, this is an older thing. I feel like people are familiar with it, and I can just kind of more freely talk spoilers and with it. But this was fascinating. This is another one of those where, like, this didn't give me a huge desire to go out and read other stuff that this author has written. I know there's a version of this where you get this and like some other short stories and things like that too. I would be curious if you have specific something that you recommend from this author, or something kind of in the same similar vein. Between this and Body Snatchers, I'm a little bit more curious to try out some of these older, like, sci-fi weird stories, because I've done that here and there, but not a ton. So definitely let me know if you have any recommendations. But it's just, this is one of those books, again, where I feel like it's an experience to read it. So if you like, kind of older sci-fi, horror, whatever, any of that type of stuff, I think this is definitely one to read. I'm really glad I read it. I don't think it's one I will ever reread, but it's definitely one to experience. And it has been curious to see what those other, I think there are at least two other adaptations. And I know, like, this is the other thing too, is this is like a pivotal book in both zombie and vampire type of things. This was pretty early on in a lot of those, and I feel like inspired a lot of vampire and zombie type things coming later. So it's really interesting as well too. I like seeing whether it's books or movies or whatever, like the things that were really foundational, even if I don't end up always liking them, I feel like I appreciate just seeing, like, oh, that's so fascinating to see, this was one of the first examples of this, or this was something early that inspired so many other things. And that's one of the reasons I like reading older fantasy too, where sometimes I don't end up caring for it, and there are things that don't age the best, but it's so interesting to see where some of those things came from. And this was obviously a hugely influential work, and so it just was, yeah, fascinating read, and I really enjoyed my time, and I will maintain the ending just is just mwah. It hits so hard and so well, and I think a very fantastic ending to the book. So again, check this out if you haven't. I do definitely recommend giving it a shot, and I'd be curious on your thoughts if you have read it, or, like I said, you have other recommendations in the same vein. Definitely let me know in the comments. That's it for this one, though. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description, as always, for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizard of the Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun, and we'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.